Hey everyone, it's Dr. Brad Meyer. I'm super excited to be working with Gilbert Garcia this Saturday, August 5th at noon. We're going to do a 1-hour TMEA clinic virtually, and so I hope you all attend. Check it out, get some tips as we start this great process of getting us ready for our area, region, and all state auditions. Have a great day and act some jacks.
Hello, guys. It's great to finally be back after quite a long hiatus in our streams. Um, but we are stoked about today's clinic, guys. It's Dr. Brad Meyer, as you could see with a little preview. Dr. Brad Meyer will be presenting a clinic on the Texas All-State Music, and you know, Texas Percussion All-State, and you know in general Texas music is very competitive, very cutthroat, right? So uh but in particular, uh Texas percussion music auditions are pretty competitive, and any little thing that we can gain, that can give us an edge, guys, will definitely work. And ultimately, it's the experience that the kids have, and the positive experiences that they have, right? But we're trying to, give them success. And for sure, all the tips and tricks that Dr. Brett Meyer will be sharing will be very helpful. There's been times that I take all his concepts and I use them with students, and those students have had success and advanced past area and into state just by using completely his concepts. I've personally experienced that. So definitely you want to take note and you want to utilize them. And without further ado, here we have the man of the hour, Dr. Brad Meyer. Sir, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing, Gilbert?
Doing great, and I'm super excited to have you here. Um, in the past, we've had the experience, right, to have you in our live event, and also doing some all-state clinics and some different topics as well, and always on point. So the consummate teacher. That's my humble, honest opinion about you, sir.
I appreciate it. I'm just trying my best to help everyone and just share the love of music. And like you were saying, it's the TMEA All State, but it can be really competitive. But it's really just about having a great experience and learning along the way. Because I think that that's what we can really get out of these etudes. Is we've got ninth graders, 10th graders, all the way through seniors, and we can all keep learning. And these are great vehicles to
Yes,
learn concepts that are both fundamental through advanced. So I'm
yes.
really excited to be here and just share a little knowledge in this next 50 minutes or so, and answer some questions from you. And if anyone out there, send them to Gilbert, and we can answer some questions. I think maybe if we've got some live participants as well.
Yeah, you can post them, our viewers. You can post them in comments, and then I'll see them. I'll put them on the screen, and we'll address them. That's the thing that you want to do, guys. You can customize where right there. Customize the stream by asking your questions, and then we can address them. And those questions are probably questions you have because of your students, so then this stream becomes a lot more helpful at that point. Yes. So let's just cut into it. Would you say, sir?
Yeah, want to
Oh,
share the TMEA timpani video first with the jam track.
okay, with the jam track, that's the one you want. Give me a quick second.
Yeah. So,
Um,
for
well,
all you
well,
who
well,
don't know, Robbie Green
yes,
created these jam tracks, and they're awesome to play along with. They're great because you can slow them down. They're basically, you know, the entire piece, but with a little fun background. And then you can also get the version without the solo in it, so that later on students can play them for things like juries or exams, or maybe even for a concert. And you could even get all your students who are working on these to play at the same time. So you could have, you know, all your snare drummers playing along for your end of semester concert, because they've been working on this material so hard for so long. It'd be a shame if they just did their auditions and either made it or didn't and then left it go. Instead, play it at your end of semester concerts with these fun jam tracks. You can have the entire group playing along with them, and have the parents kind of see what they've been doing while they're at school, not in marching band.
Yes, and if I may add, Brad, I showed the recording All-State recordings that are out there. We went to YouTube, and I showed it to them in class, the different ones, and then I asked them, which one did you like best, and they all pointed to yours.
Well, it must be the haircut. They
Yeah.
must like the haircut.
And I asked them why, and this was their response: he grooved. And I think that what you're talking about, what Tommy Green did, is amazing, because they're practicing to a groove, and it's going to help them nuance a lot better. That's my take on that.
Rodney Green's over at Klein Collins High School, and he's the man. And you know, I just can't thank him enough for putting these together, and so quickly too. He really got on it. So he's the man, and you know, he's been doing this for probably 8 or 9 years, I think, well before I got a hold of them. So I just took them, and I thought they were such a great educational tool that I wanted to start using them. And it makes it fun for me, because I play these all fall as well. And so just like the students, they get a little tiresome. And so it's a great way to kind of get a little bit extra on top of it. You know, it's like when we play orchestral excerpts as professional musicians, we don't want to just be thinking about bolero, the snare part. We want to be thinking about the sax, and we want to think about the trumpet and the piccolo parts. And so it's great to have that internal audiation along with just the hand part that we're playing, or the percussion part that we're playing.
Exactly. Let's see it.
All right.
There we have it.
Well,
so
that's all I gotta do, right? Is let the videos play, and then I'll move to the next instrument. No.
Well, you know, there was a lot of information in your playing, so we could technically do that.
Yeah, so I guess what I'll just start out with is a couple of the commonly asked things and then get into some smaller things. Take about 10 minutes on each instrument after the video plays. And again, ask questions because if you got questions, there are obviously things I'm not talking about and they're the things you want to know. So please ask away. So the first big question that I always get are what mallets am I using? It's a pretty simple question. For most of the tune, I use the Vic Firth Tim Jennis GEN7. They're articulate. And then actually for the soft part, which starts at measure 59 through measure 68, I use the Gen 8s, the multo articulates, just for a little bit more articulation at that softer volume. So that's the first question I get. And then another interesting detail that you might not initially notice in that video is that the top drum is actually a different drum than what I'm playing on right now. So this is a standard set. We got low to high, 32-inch, 29, 26, 23, but the pitches on the 23 required for this etude are things like E flat, F, and F sharp, which are kind of in that middle lower range of a drum. And for me, I was always taught you really want to be in that upper middle range is the best. And if you had to choose, the very upper versus the lower of a smaller drum, because you get a little bit more head tension. The tone's a little bit more smooth and even. And it might be a little thinner, but it's not going to be as flappy, tubby, or dipping like a smaller drum would. So in that video, I actually put another 26 up here, and I just tuned it a little bit higher so that it could get to that F sharp. But really, if you got a standard set of drums, that's great. But that's just a little tip because I'm always trying to think about getting the best sounds, not just using the drums that I have, but using everything that I can to get the best sounds possible. So if you see that that top drum looks a little different, that's why. All right, so next, let's talk about my favorite thing to talk about on timpani, which is lift. All right, the big thing that we get with young students when they're playing timpani is they come to it from marching band and they apply their marching band concepts. Now, I always tell people music is a lot like a toolbox. When you get one skill, it's another tool in your toolbox. You don't want to build a house with a hammer only or a saw only because you couldn't. And so marching percussion, a lot, especially drumline stuff, is focused a lot on downstrokes. And so here in the concert realm, especially on timpani, we're going to be focused on lifting and upstroking. So I see a lot of young students, and when they play, they use, and to me, that often reminds me of like the guy on the not canoe, but the Viking ships, you know. All right, and so the bad part about that downstroke on concert instruments is that while it's good for marching instruments, they've got a lot of head tension. We're using big sticks. We're trying to get a really loud sound, honestly, to project. Here, we're not worried about projecting as much. We're not trying to get to 100 yards away and have 8 snares playing in unison. We're instead in a concert hall or a classroom. So we've got walls that reverberate and project our sound. So we're focused more on tone. So when it comes to tone production, what we want to focus on is a little bit more lifting and a lot less downstroking. So instead of going, I actually like to do what I call start up, end up, and in the power triangle. And if you see me use French grip, this is match grip, French grip. Don't worry about it. Just use regular match grip if you don't know French grip. French grip is not one of those things that I recommend most, if all high schoolers learn, because a lot of them, when they change, it changes their stroke and they become really bad this way versus using their great match grip. So let's get back to lifting. So when we're playing, we want to start up in that power triangle. And I like to pretend that the surface of the drum, or when I get to snare drum or marimba, is kind of like a hot plate. It's and if you've ever touched a hot stove or anything like that, ow, you jump off immediately from that surface because it's hot and it's painful. Well, here we're going to pretend that the mallet head is kind of like our finger or whatever, and we're going to try to lift quickly. And you'll notice I'm not worried about trying to play through the drum because, again, that's a way of downstroking. Through the drum doesn't necessarily mean louder. It just it means thumpier and thuddier. And that works in marching percussion, but it works not so well in concert percussion, especially on timpani. So when I'm playing, I like to do, just like we would in any kind of warm-up, some kind of 8 on a hand stuff where we're really working on starting up and ending up and really staying up here as long as I can and making sure I'm getting rid of downstrokes. And instead, I'm coming up. So like an 8 on a hand. variations of 8 on a hand, and then also doing things like doubles. All those different kinds of stick control exercises, but doing them in this way that we're lifting. So that way, when we're playing any sound, whether it's soft or loud, we're really focused on getting a big full sound out of the drums that's not so thuddy like we're playing toms or multi-tenors or tenors or marching snare, and that would sound like this. Hopefully, I know it's the internet, but hopefully you can hear that. It's really splatty. It gets kind of this, I call it a barking sound because we're overplaying the drums and we're just not getting a full tone out of them. The next thing that I want to talk about is just about crossovers. Or do we have a question?
Yes,
We'll take a question.
Gregory.
I love a good question.
Gregory is asking. I guess he's referring to the way you had different timpani, right? Sizes.
Yeah.
He's saying, so if a student or in a live audition where only a standard timpani set was available, would you suggest practicing / recording on that?
That's a great question. And so I mentioned that because I think a lot of times it's going to just vary on the situation. So if the audition is like an audition room and they have timpani that are set up and it's just the standard 32, 26, 29, 30, 23, then, that's what you got to use. For me, I chose that 226-inch drums because I knew that top drum was in a lower, tubbier range than I wanted. So really, if they're recording and they have that option and they want to pursue it, great. Again, it's not something I find a lot of times things like that where it's a personal preference. A lot of people take that and they blow it out of proportion. They go, is this the right thing or not? And it's really not yes or no. It's what works best. Honestly, there's some drums that are 24-inch that are up top that would sound great for this piece. But in the 23, it is in that lower range. And it doesn't really matter if you try to tune the drum up because it's still the same size drum. So for me on my recording, I wanted it to sound as best as it could for all students because I want them not only getting a sense for just good rhythm and good pitches, but I want them getting the best tone. And so for me, having that 26 gave me a great tone on that top drum's pitches, and that's why I used it. Now, if you have the option and the drums and you want to take two 26s instead of a 26 and 23 to an audition, and that's how they practice, great, do it. Or if you want to record that way, do it. But again, that's one of those personal preferences where people could say, well, Dr. Meyer, it's great. You work at a university. You've got all that money, which, by the way, we don't. A lot of high schools have more money than we have, but that's a different topic.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where I just used what I had and I tried to make the best musical choices to provide a great model for students to not just watch and play along with, but actually listen to and hear tone. So that's really important to me, and that's why I did that.
Awesome. I have a question, but I'd like to ask it once you're done with your spiel.
Okay. Well, I've got a lot of spiel, so why don't you ask the question? I can talk for hours.
For phrasing, right? For phrasing purposes, grip pressure. What would be your recommendations? In general, like what grip pressure to use to be able to phrase the piece better. Maybe give us some examples with certain measures.
Yeah, I think grip pressure is one of those things where generally a high schooler, because they are doing a lot more marching percussion, is going to always be over gripping. And so for me, I actually will, for first couple lessons in timpani in college, I'll actually have my students play with just the grip point, as in the thumb and first two fingers, and literally try to get those back fingers off just so that they can let that stick kind of breathe and rebound. Now, obviously, I don't want them getting in the habit of taking their back fingers off permanently, but most students, they're going to be grabbing on pretty hard, pretty firmly with those back fingers and stopping it. And that's going to contribute to that downstroking. So for the beginning of the excerpt, we've got this. And so that whole time, I'm really trying to be open and relaxed. The only time that I grip a little is when I'm trying to go from a high or a loud volume to a low/soft volume. And that's just to get the sticks lower. And then I immediately loosen up to as loose as possible without my fingers coming off the stick. I just want to lightly feel that stick in my hand so that I have the ability, if I need it for doubles, to stroke a little finger out. If I need to stop it by using a little bit of grip, like our downstrokes from like a Bucks exercises, then I can use that to stop the stick down, but then immediately let go. Now, most of this piece is in a quarter note time, or 5/8, it's eighth note time. But there's a great moment here when we get into 6/8 at measure 47. And so in 6/8, because it's not a quarter note or like kind of an eighth note feel, it's really important that we feel that 6/8. And you can actually see that he's kind of marked the 6/8 feel with these tenutos marked in halfway through 48 and 49. And so tenuto literally means weighted. We're just adding a little bit of arm weight. You could even say just a tiny bit of finger tension, but actually not too much. But here, if we start at 47 and we play these 3 bars, and we just played it all even with the stay crescendo, it would sound like this. Just sounds like a whole bunch of eighth notes after each other, which is fine. And I was lifting, getting a great sound, hopefully. But now if I dig in a little and I try to give this, and again, I'm not accenting for the tenutos. I'm trying to add arm weight. So it's just a little bit of a agogic or a little bit of time feel that you feel. So here it is now with this dotted quarter note feel. So da, 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 da. So hopefully you can see that while I didn't really change my grip pressure, I was still lifting, but I was pulsing with it, and I was trying to add that arm weight every dotted quarter note, to give that dotted quarter note feel in the 6/8. So that's what I would recommend for any kind of feel. You could go further along, when there's like 5/8. For example, measure 80, we've got, that could actually be phrased da 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 da, if you want to feel it that way, because that's how it's beamed. And again, using just those slight little tenutos to give that feeling of the metering, the way that it's barred or beamed, the way that he's done that. So hopefully that answers the question. But again, with high schoolers, young students, I'm always trying to help lift and get the fingers not off the stick, but just lightly touching. And again, you can always go back to that metaphor of a baby bird. You're trying to hold it, but you're not trying to crush it, but you're also not letting it drop. And I've almost never seen students drop sticks. So I always tend to err on the side of, if it falls, I compliment them. And I say, hey, you dropped your stick. That must mean you were relaxed and loose, hopefully. That's a good thing. So I'd rather err on that side of the spectrum than too firm and feeling like they need to be in control of it.
Yes. Thank you. That did answer my question.
Awesome. Let's talk about just a couple small little areas, and then we'll move on to snare drum. So the first one is going to be probably what I would consider the hardest section of the solo. That's this pianissimo section at measure 59. And it's hard because, first of all, it's the softest section. Secondly, it's got some really fast sextuplets that move between the top 3 drums and again on the bottom drum. And then there's some things that I think people will see in my video that they might not be doing. And again, I don't say you have to do what I do in my video. There's lots of great people putting out other videos, and I'm sure they're playing it differently. I actually don't use a lot of their videos because I don't want to be ripping off what they are doing and claiming it as my own. So every sticking, all of my philosophies are generally with just having watched once or twice from other people, not really like overstudying them. So if you overstudy mine, great, but you're not going to see me kind of stealing from other people because I want these to be my own ideas, because I'm sure they work really hard on their videos too. Anyways, sorry, that's my disclaimer. Back to 59. So again, I'm using those Gen 8s, those multo articulates. And for this light volume, I'm really trying to be really lifty, but it's hard because it's soft. So I need to also think about stickings. So this is a great place because we've got these sextuplets, and I'm going to play it louder so you can just hear it better. At the end of 59, and you could end that with a crossover. But I always find that crossovers tend to be accentuations because we're crossing over, so we have to come up higher, and then we come down faster or quicker, and that gives us a louder note. So instead, I tend to use doubles in place of crossovers whenever possible. Crossovers are great, but I just find, especially in a small versus, it's a little bit more risky to do that crossover. So for me, if you slow it down, you'll see that I add a double at the end of the sextuplets. And what that allows me to do is to stay a little bit more on the same drums, keep my hands uncrossed, and hopefully that gives me a little bit more consistency of sound so that you hear the rhythm better versus any kind of accidental accentuation or any kind of like when you cross over, losing that last left on the drum. Again, doubles have similar issues, but I find that a lot of students' doubles are better than their crossovers. So I tend to encourage them to use those a little bit more. But if you got a great tenor player and they go and be really clear, great. It's just a suggestion. It's not a rule. And then same thing at measure 62. We've got still at pianissimo. We've got, and I'm not tuned to the right pitches. I should have done that. I won't take the time. Anyways, but you can see that I do. And I do that because either I would have to go something like that, or, you know, I don't even know why you would add crossovers into a section like that. But at that pianissimo volume, you're adding a lot of chance for inconsistency by doing all this lateral movement between the 29 and the 32. Instead, just focus on really quality double strokes and really getting them to speak correctly. And I think you're going to have a much better time with consistency of sound and consistency of tone. Then next couple bars that are 5/8. Again, you can see I'm using those doubles. Why am I doing that? Well, if it was louder, I might use some more alternating because I feel like those are more consistent at louder volumes. But at those softer volumes, or, you know, those crossovers or quick lateral movements, those are going to cause bigger issues than just. So again, I don't recommend doubles always. My rule of thumb is alternate when possible, doubles when you have to, crossovers if necessary, and you should almost never triple anything. And that's kind of my order of operation when I'm thinking about timpani and creating great tone quality. I think the only other thing I have, and this is really common, is counting rests. So whenever I listen to timpani players, you know, they're very interested in playing better, but then when we get to rest, they kind of shut off everything and they just get the drums tuned up and then they start playing again. And at every competition, you're going to have a judge. And like, let's say at the end of measure 32, you've got 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2. You're going to have a judge that's literally just tapping their chest or tapping their leg, and they're going to be subdividing, and they're going to wait for that student, that auditionee, to come in the right moment. Now, if they come in slightly different, yeah, we're human. It's all good. But you have students that just don't count, and they kind of go, you know, they get tuned up, and then, oh, this feels about good. And it's way off. It's way early or way late. That's when a judge is going to start taking off points. And again, it's not all about judging, but these are skills that we can use for percussion ensemble, for solos, for concert band, which is counting rest. And while it may seem easy, it's actually a little tricky because we're doing pedal changes the whole time, or drum tuning changes. And so we really need to make sure. What I do when I first learn these is I actually count out loud. So when I play that phrase, I'll go 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then if I do that for a couple weeks or a month, then I can take that counting out loud out, and then you'll see me end the phrase, and it'll look something like this. And I'll literally just pulse. I'll groove to the counting, and with the play along track, it kind of makes it groovy too. So I'll kind of count along with that internal sound or song as well. So those are my couple tips. There's lots more we could go through, but I don't want to spend all day on one instrument and miss the next. So unless there's any other questions on timpani, let's move to snare drum. Are there any other questions? I can't hear you.
Not so far. Do you want to go on to snare?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Make sure I'm in the frame. There we go. All right. So again, really cool play along track, really helpful in just having something to play along with, makes it a lot of fun. Again, snare drum is one of those things where if you ask a percussionist, is it a musical instrument? Hopefully they'll say yes. But if you ask other non-percussionists, a lot of times they'll say no. They think it as just a kind of like a click. It's just a pop. It's just a sound that makes rhythm. They don't think of it as being musical. So for me, I think that play along track does two things. First of all, it gives you something that you can play with. And secondly, it gives you that cool kind of xylophone part as well. That gives you a melody that you can use as a base to create your own sense of musicality towards it. Now, that's not to say that you have to be hearing a melody, but I think for young students, they have a hard time trying to create melodic or musical phrasings on snare drum.
Yes.
They just think of it like we teach marching snare drum, where it's very, is it the right height, accent and tap, boom. But if you've ever heard people do like drum speak, chicka-da-ba, za, ah, da, 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 da. It's a lot of inflection and maybe even a lot of pitch for something that's a non-pitched instrument. So if we can think more pitch-like, it's going to help this non-pitched instrument sound more musical and have more phrasing.
I think that they're great because it nudges their brain.
Absolutely.
I think it's great that it nudges their brain into how to phrase it, how to push it. Where do I start? Where do I end?
Absolutely. And so one of the things that I first want to talk about with snare, well, we'll talk about just the quick and dirty. I forgot to mention I'm sponsored by Yamaha, Evans Drumhead, Zildjian Cymbals, Black Swamp Percussion, Tycoon Percussion, and Vic Firth Sticks and Mallets. And so here I'm using the Ne Rosario out of the Symphonic Collection, and I'm on this really nice Yamaha 14 by 5-inch brass drum, really gorgeous instrument. So, and I do like to dampen. I put these 2 moon gels on. I find that a lot of students, they'll put like a wallet on or their phone. And if I put my phone on here, you can hear that right now with a little bit of dampening. I'm getting a nice big full sound without those little ringing overtones that we all don't necessarily love. But if I put my phone on, you get very little snare resonance. You don't get any of the top head resonance. It sounds more like a table than it does a drum. So make sure if you dampen your snare drum, which I recommend everyone should, you're doing it just a little so that we're getting the full tone of the drum, but we're just removing those little ringing overtones. All right, so talking about this solo, I think the biggest thing that's going to be a challenge for people is feeling it in the halftime feel. So this is marked at 92 to 100 at the half note. And so what that means is early on, we should probably practice with smaller beat groupings, things like 8th notes, 16th notes, triplets, things like that, that can help us with getting the exactness of each rhythm. But as we get later into the process, as we get it closer to tempo, we want to start working on it in the feel of the piece. And so this piece, if I kind of it's got that halftime feel. And so we really want to make sure that we're focused on that when we get to those later stages of the preparation and audition process. And so here we need to focus on a couple things. Now, the first is going to be interpretation of small rhythms. So things like the dotted 8th to 16th to. So one of the big problems that I already know students are going to have is this one. And what you can hear there, or hopefully heard, is that I was tripletizing everything. Those dotted 16th or dotted 8th notes to 16th notes were not square. It wasn't. Instead, it was. And so what we want to do is a great exercise, especially slow, is to play this, but play it with the skeleton. So if I have my quarter note, da, 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 and then what you can do is you can accent it like I just did, or you can then put the middle notes on the rim. So. that you're internalizing those middle notes without actually playing them. And hopefully you hear the difference now between the tripletized bad version versus the correct 16th note bass dotted 8th note version. I am playing a little louder just so it's very obvious over the live stream than it is marked. So that's the first thing, is getting the correct interpretation and then keeping that as you get up to that halftime feel. So so hopefully you heard all those correct sounds. Now, one of the things that I love doing is something that Anders Ostrom told me or did at a clinic. He said, move in groove. So especially when I'm getting closer to those performance tempos, I like to move to the music. And here we're moving to the half note. So a great way for young students who are maybe in marching band is just to mark time. So they can use a skill that they already have. Or if you've got someone who's maybe a little stronger on bass drum or drum set, act like they're playing the bass drum with the right foot. But then what we want to do is take out any kind of thing that can make sound. So tapping the foot, stomping the feet, whatever. And we want to move our body. So I wore shorts because it's Texas, it's summer, it's hot. So you'll have to forgive me if you're offended, but we're all doing it right now. But what I like to do is bend my knees so that my whole body is moving, my torso, my head. And I don't just like when I'm doing like head nods. That's like Night at the Roxbury. It's not very cool. Instead, we want to move our whole body and just let us kind of fall into it so that we get a little bit of movement. So that gives us a little better feel. All right, so keep that half note time going. So that's all well and good, but then we start getting to some more challenging rhythms and still trying to keep that half note feel. So with these rhythms, the first thing is always work them out. So like an example is measure 21, where we have a quintuplet, or as I like to call it, a fivelet. So 5 notes in the beat or the half note. So something I love to do is what I would kind of call like a shifting gears kind of exercise. So shifting gears, like you're in a stick shift car and you're going from first gear, second gear, third gear. We're going to kind of do that with eighth notes, then quintuplet, then sextuplets, and back and forth. So I would just do eighth notes, obviously all of this with the metronome on when you have time, but eighth notes to quintuplets, back and forth. So remember, we're in halftime, so those eighth notes feel like 16th notes to the pulse, but that's actually the half note. So there, what you hopefully heard was a nice transition from eighth notes to quintuplets and back. But what I wasn't doing was accenting. I wasn't going. Because a lot of times when people are accenting, they're not listening to those middle notes. They're just trying to land on the hand that the accent's on. So instead, what we do is take out any kind of accentuation so that you can hear if your speed is changing. And then if you hear, all of a sudden you can hear that's not a great quintuplet. I'm kind of slow to the start, I'm speeding up, and then I'm slowing down. Instead, the speed change is happening on the second note of the quintuplet. Just like any line, if you have a dot and then you have a second dot, you know that slope. Same thing with the rhythm. If the first note's here and the second note's here, you know the third one's here, 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 and so on. So and get that feeling of a quintuplet, and then you can actually go to the sextuplet as well. So with the metronome on, that makes it a lot more, you can hear if you're right or wrong, and it gives you a little bit more tools to understand if you're correct on your interpretation. But the big thing is to make sure all the notes are evenly spaced and that we're not kind of beat shooting, going for those half note accents. So that's how we can learn the quintuplet feel and add that to our half note time. The last thing, which is probably the hardest section, is starting at like measure 31, or sorry, 33, we go into a halftime triplet feel. So what we can do is we can try to say, okay, well, if the half note triplet is really felt in halftime, then it feels like the quarter note triplet. But I think that gives us too much margin for error. So let's instead think about the quarter note and try to place a half note triplet over a quarter note. So the first note would obviously be on the downbeat of a 4-beat measure. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then the next half note triplet would be on the second partial of the triplet of beat 2. So triplet, 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 2. So 1 pullet, 2 pullet, 3 pullet, 4 pullet, 1 pullet, 2 pullet. And then finally, the third half note triplet is going to land on the third partial of the triplet on beat 3. So the whole thing would be 1 pullet, 2 pullet, 3 pullet, 4 pullet, 1 pullet, 2 pullet, 3 pullet, 4 pullet, 1. And if you do that, you can subdivide it. And so that can give us a great reference for how to subdivide those. And then as we work them up into the half note feel, we can have a much better foundation versus trying to go, which, is just kind of guessing at it, trying to get 3 notes in the measure as a whole. So there's some other rhythms that are a little bit more challenging. If we look at measure 42, we've got a triplet within the triplet time. We would call this a nested triplet because it's nested within the larger triplet. There's a couple different words for it. But how do you find that out? Well, if you've got the triplet, so you know that the triplet of the full time is. All right, let's take the quarter note triplet. So we've got. And now let's add the triple to that. So we're going to go. And now let's even it out. All right, so now we've got 9lets, and then we need to just fit it into the bar. So we can go. And that's how we figured out. We don't just want to guess and kind of go, and kind of fit the notes in. We want to mathematically figure out where those notes are so that as we speed it up, we're not just guessing. And then that can totally get us to where we need to be in terms of correct interpretation of those rhythms. The last thing that I have that we'll just talk briefly about is make sure you know when rolls are attached or they're not attached, or tied or not tied. And so look at all of our rolls that are like measure 25 and measure 28, those are all attached rolls to each other, but they're not attached to the release note. So at 25, we got. All right, so here I put a little bit of space before I release those notes. The only note that I believe is tied is at measure 40 to 41. So we've got. So you can see that roll is releasing to the downbeat of measure 41. So that's what I got. Are there any questions, Gilbert? Or do you have any that you want to talk through real quick?
Excuse me. Connor had a question. It was, where are the tracks available? I told him on a comment that we would put them in the links under comments when the stream is over.
Yep.
We can direct them to where you have them, or if you can also mention it.
Yeah, they're just on my website, www.brad-meyer.com, and just search under SFA Percussion. There, you'll see TMEA videos, and they're just at the bottom of the page, and you can download them. They're free. Again, Robbie Green created them. They're a fantastic resource. He put a lot of time and effort and offer those free to the entire state of Texas. It's just amazing. So we really need to give him some thanks, round of applause, and maybe a root beer.
Yeah, or two. Yeah.
Root beer.
Yeah. Well, Brett, I do have a question, and I guess it's the obvious. Every educator's probably, faces it. Playing pianissimo. what would you recommend a teacher and a student to practice, a teacher to teach their student how to handle playing at a low end with substance
Yeah.
and grace?
I think that's a great question, and um, it's one that's really challenging because it's like any advice that you get that you don't want to hear. So, what's the three big things doctors tell us to do to stay healthy? We need to eat better, we need to exercise, and you need to sleep the right amount. And so, soft playing is one of those things where we would like to think that it's just playing lower. So, if I could play this, I just got to do it at that lower height. The problem, though, is that there's a couple things happen. Nerves can happen, drum sensitivity. So when the snares kind of turn on and off or resonate with the drum. And so the big thing that we need to do is really work on our soft playing the same way we would work anything. So you just take, I like marching band exercises, just very fundamental ones, and playing them at like quadruple pianissimo. So take, for example, my favorite is just triplet grid. So and so on and so on. And so what I'm doing there is I'm really trying to, if you could notice, use my arms. I'm not trying to use my wrist because, and again, I'm not a biologist, but I try to take what I learned in school and apply it and figure out how it works. And so kind of what I've come up with and hope is correct is that we've got lots of red muscle groups in our big muscles. So like our biceps, our triceps, our thighs, our hamstrings, those are all red muscle groups. Those are what we call slow twitch muscle groups. Whereas our eyelids are white muscle groups. They're fast twitch muscle groups. So if you've ever tried to blink your eyes slowly, try to do it. You'll see that your eyes kind of flutter and freak out. So they're not great at controlling like slow movements. So we want to use those big muscle groups. So when it comes to soft playing, you'll see me kind of do what I kind of call the milking the cow. All right. So I'm using my arm to, instead of using my wrist, because those wrist muscles are smaller. They're going to be more of your white twitch muscles than are in your tricep and bicep when you're moving that. So for soft playing, I really recommend use those arms and you can see I'm using mainly my arms there, except for when I get louder, which is actually, if you think about it, the opposite way that we teach marching percussion. A lot of marching percussion teachers say for soft playing, use your wrist only because it's less muscle mass, it's less weight on the stick, so it should be a softer sound. And when it's louder, we're going to use more arm because it's more muscle mass, it's going to be louder. But it's weird because while that works for weight, that doesn't work great for that ability to control soft sound or ability to use rebound. So we actually reverse it for concert percussion. So for soft playing, we're using arm with that really light, open, just barely touching finger grip. And then for loud playing, you can just play as loud as you want. And that's mainly coming from the wrist because the velocity is providing the volume, not the weight, which is actually much more efficient. So hope that helps.
Uh, I'm juggling things behind the screen, guys. I apologize. Uh, Tim Jennis gave me the exact same tip. He goes, you go to arm, and that way, you'll play softer, but the sound will be fuller.
Yeah. He's
Mo, mo,
a, you know,
yeah, yeah. Thank you.
awesome.
There are no more questions.
All right, let's do mounts.
Let's move on.
Let's do two
Which
mounts.
one did you want to start with? Which one?
Two mounts with the jam track, please.
Okay, give me a second. I exit him out of the screen, guys, so that he's changing his setup. He'll come back in a bit. Okay,
Do you want
here
to
we
play?
go.
Do you want
Yeah.
to play the cue out? Cool.
Here we go.
And welcome. Hit the record button.
Ah, it's like a breath of fresh air.
One, two, 1, 2, 3.
All
That
right.
track was fun.
Yeah, I love it. It's really fun intro and outro too.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to ask any questions? Do you want me to hit some stuff?
Well, the big one is accuracy. I know I ask this every year, and I like to personally, as an educator, I like to amass, put on my list of what tips and tricks do educators have to increase the note accuracy. And the reaction I sometimes get from different educators, professors, and successful public school teachers is like, oh, not that question. The bottom line is, it's a huge issue, especially in area, note accuracy. You have judges, one note, two notes, three notes, four notes. And even though we want to think musically and not like notes and rhythms, we want to think expression, but it is an issue. And it's a huge elephant in the room in the auditions that as educators we would do justice to our students in addressing.
Yeah, I think that's a great topic to bring up. It's a topic that every instrument deals with, so we shouldn't be afraid to attack it. The reason why I think it has a little bit of more weight to percussion is because we don't get the ability to frack a note. It's either the
Mhm.
right note or absolutely the wrong note. And so there's no hiding if you hit the wrong note. And so we have to kind of come to grips with that about our instrument, is that it's either the right note or the wrong note. And we're trying our best to play as accurate as we can. But if we're inaccurate and we're musical, inaccuracy can make music hard to listen to, even if it's super musical. Vice versa, if a solo is very accurate, but it's not musical, it's hard to listen to. So again, it's not one that we can prioritize 100% over the other. We need to give weight to musicality and to accuracy, but know that both of those things are not everything, that they are combined to give a full, clear picture of the musical product that we want to express. And so note accuracy is something we should absolutely focus on, because I could play really musically, but if it's very inaccurate, I wouldn't say people wouldn't pay to come back and see me, but I wouldn't pay to come back to see me if it was really inaccurate, even though it's very expressive. So, how can we increase note accuracy? Well, I think it starts actually the most importantly on day one. The biggest thing that I work with my first semester students on is Dr. Meyer's rule of thumb. And that rule of thumb is 50% or slower. And what that applies to is the learning process. Everyone wants to, when they get this piece, They hear me playing it or they hear someone else playing it, and it's at this tempo. Great. But you have to know that as a student or as the educator of your students, they don't know the solo, and that you don't know the solo if you're the student. And so what you need to do is take small chunks and learn them at half tempo or slower. So like if you're not a great form-out player, you may need to go 40% tempo or 30% tempo. And of course, that implies that you're practicing with a metronome. But if I'm going half tempo, oh, missed a note, then I can already start to figure out where I'm going to have trouble up tempo. Also, by practicing half tempo, you ingrain muscle memory so much better. If you're just thinking, I see all these high schoolers that play way too fast. They'll play faster than the solos written on the day one that they're practicing it, the minute one. Why? Because we have this innate sense, and we've all done it. I did it when I was younger, that if I play it fast, I can get through it quicker. But that's just not how music works. We have to build that muscle memory from day one. It's great if you know that that's an E major scale, but it's not the E major scale only. It's patterns, it's turns, it's moving around, it's doubles. And so we got to get that exact pieces notes in our hand. Now, this also, I think, comes a little bit, we're talking about muscle memory. We need to think about volume, aka dynamics. So a lot of people, they learn solos at what I call mezzo boring, and they'll go, and it's this very kind of just noodly approach. Instead, you can play a chorale, which is a very slow piece usually, or you can play the fastest piece at very slow tempo and make it really musical. All right, adding phrasing. And then when you get faster, those phrasings will come out more naturally. But if you add the dynamics in at the end of the process, you're ultimately changing your muscle memory. And that's what this whole instrument, that's what we do as musicians, whether it's vocalists, it's muscle memory of this area. String players, muscle memory of where they are on the board, where they are on the bow. And so we have to ingrain the right muscle memory from day one if we want to truly give ourselves the accuracy that we desire. Now, that's the beginning of the process. Let's talk about note accuracy when you're up to tempo. So let's say you did all the right stuff. You started it at half tempo or slower, Dr. Meyer's rule of thumb, but you got it up to tempo and you're a little inaccurate. What you need to do is not just play the piece over and over when there's probably one or two small sections that's inaccurate for you. So a great example in this piece is that section at letter A that happens again, I think at like letter D or something, where we're going. That section has a whole bunch of turnarounds in it. And depending on your sticking, which we'll talk about in a minute, there may be doubles, there may be like this crossover or cross around that you have. And those things can really affect your ability to be accurate at tempo. So what you need to do is find something that works for you. So a great method is kind of the penny method, where if you take a piece and let's say that you're trying to work this up to 100, that you practice it at half tempo and you play it 5 times. So you put 5 pennies on the railing, not on the instrument. And then you move them over to this railing. Each time you get one right. And then if you get it wrong, you got to take one and put it back. And when all 5 of those get over here, then you bump it up like 5 clicks. So then you go to 55, play it accurately. If you can get all 5 pennies over, put it back, put it up to 60. And then you're working it in this very structured process. Now, this is challenging for young students and for old students, old professionals, whatever you want to call, because it's monotonous. It's the hard work. It's the grind. But there's a reason why the people that grind, they put in that hard work that's monotonous, they're more successful. Because the fun of the music, yeah, is playing it over and over. Coming into the band hall, running in, playing it through, having all your friends kind of looking at you, maybe playing it a little extra fast than it should be. And you feel good. You're like, oh, people noticed me. It was fun to, be the center of attention for a moment. But the good work, the great work is going to be in that practice room with some kind of metronome on, with some kind of repetitious practicing where you're not just going through the piece over and over or through even a section over and over. You're really focused on that section and you're gradually building it up over the course of days, weeks, or even months. I played a piece called Prism Rhapsody, which is that Keiko Abe 2-mallet piece, super challenging. And I had a competition that was a month out. And so I took it at half tempo, and every day I would bump it up 1 BPM every day from the last. And that's what I did for like 30 days or whatever, how long I had. And by the time I got to the competition, I felt great. I was really note accurate and I was musical. And I just felt like I give myself that process that allowed me to be free and musical while not having to worry as much about my note accuracy. So hopefully that helps some people think about how they're working on their note accuracy throughout the beginning and end of the process of practicing.
Very helpful. Very helpful.
So let's talk a little bit about, because we hit quite a few things that I was going to talk about anyway with that. Things like practicing with the dynamics right away, half tempo or slower. Something that I should mention, just because, again, people ask, I use the Van Cise M113s. And actually, what you'll notice is that this is a regular M113, and this is the one that I'm using. I've actually cut 1 3/4 inches off the bottom for my 2-mallet playing. Now, I do this because this is where you should hold a 2-mallet kind of grip. You shouldn't, most likely, you should be holding at the back of the mallets because it makes them really long. That can be inaccurate. It can make them extra weighted than they need to. Think about xylophone mallets. They don't have extremely long handles. Why? Because we don't play xylophone with 4 mallets. Now, the reason why marimba mallets come with such long handles is because we're using them for 4 mallets so that we can get really big intervals when we need to and things like that. So for 2-mallet playing, if you have the option, if you have the finances to buy an extra pair and you want to cut 1.5 inches or 1 3/4 inches off, great, do that. But ask your instructor, ask your parents first. Don't say Dr. Meyer said to do it, chop your mallets off, and then get your family angry and then have them send me mean messages. So I do this because what it allows me to do is make sure that as I'm playing around, and especially going out towards accidentals, that I'm not hitting the butt end on the instrument. So that's just a little something. That's detail-oriented stuff, but some people like to know that. So the first thing is about that section at measure or letter A. So you'll notice that I have a lot of doubles in mine. Oh, sorry. All right. And I'm playing all these doubles because for me, it makes more sense than there's like this like big turnarounds. And some people are better at those. Some people prefer more alternating stickings. This goes back to a long conversation people have about Porgy and Bess. Whether to use doubles or not. And honestly, it's whatever works best. As long as you practice it, make it sound even and smooth. So you'll notice in my recording, I have quite a few more doubles in that challenging section than other people do. But do what works best for you. For me, I like the doubles because I find that going down B to E is a lot easier than, because I always feel like the mallets are being turned and taken away, and I don't like doing that crossover as well there. Other things we want to watch out in this solo are rolls. So this is one of those books that if you don't know, you hopefully do now, that all the capital letters are where we roll. You also need to go to the TMEA errata because he's extended a couple of the rolls as well. But make sure that you're rolling all the notes that have a capital R or a capital L. And so also make sure that you know if there's a break or not. So if you look at the last roll of the first page, we roll on that B, and then we have that scale run up to that B major scale, and we don't want to go. We actually need a little break there because it's not tied. So make sure you know where rolls are, where they're tied, and if they are or if they are not connected. Other things. What else we got in here? Oh, centers and edges. So on this solo, I chose mainly edges because I find that it's a little bit, it moves around a lot between accidentals and edges. It can get a little faster if we go to that top tempo, which is 104. But I also find that it's just a little bit more accurate, which allows me to be a little bit more musical. The only time where I chose to use centers were 2 points. The first was a sound choice. So at measure 47 and 48, we kind of go out to these big notes of, what do we got? We got these accented C sharps, and I just felt like those being big 8th notes at forte, those had a bigger, fuller sound in the center. But also when we have like the trill at measure 29, we've got this. If you can see, I'm actually putting my right hand on the center of the C sharp and my left hand on the edge of the D sharp. Now this allows me to start the roll on the lower note and then end it on the lower note, so that I get that start and ending trill note to be the note that's the primary note, the C sharp. And then I also get that left to come down more easily. So again, I use mainly edges for note accuracy, getting around purposes. I use doubles to make sure that I'm not doing any crossovers, and that help me kind of keep my hands from being uncrossed as well. So make sure, look at different videos. There's no set in stone rule. And yes, in this book, there are written stickings. I always recommend use the written stickings when they're in there at first. And then if you and your instructor talk about using some alternate stickings, great. But don't just start throwing your stickings in there, because especially for high schoolers, you're younger, you don't have quite the experience that your teacher and I have, and that's okay. You want to use the information that's in front of you, adhere to it, and then change it, knowing that, okay, I knew what it was in the book, but now I'm going to use person X or person Y's stickings because I like how they get me around the instrument, or they get rid of this issue or that issue. So that's all I have to say about the two mounts. Any questions about two mounts here, Gilbert?
Nope. You covered I was going to address the mallet length, but you covered it. I think that's a great idea. A great idea. To be able to move and keep the arms low, use more wrist, and it'll also enhance the note accuracy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So shall we segue into the four mallets?
Four mallet. Here we go.
Okay. That's a gorgeous piece. Gorgeous piece.
Yeah, I really like the selections this year. It's really nice. I think Dr. Zader did a great job selecting it. And actually,
Yes.
that's a great segue, because I think he did a really nice job of making this piece a little bit more firmed up in terms of what to do in it. So
Yes.
if you go into the TMEA errata sheet, he gives some dynamics in there that aren't marked in the original solo. And so while some people could claim it doesn't give you as much ability to be musical, I think what it does is it helps everyone not have to guess. Because I think it was a year or two ago, there was a solo that had just really long phrases with no crescendos or decrescendos. And so everyone was doing something different. And that's great because we love that musicality. But I also felt like everyone was kind of like, well, am I wrong or am I right? And so I think that this makes it a little bit more clear for a
Yes.
big population of people to play it as well as possible musically, while still being expressive. And there are some moments for some expressiveness, but I think that it's really nice what he did to give the edits that he did.
Yep. I agree. Totally agree.
Well, do you have any questions, Gilbert, before I start? Anything you want me to talk about?
Well, to me, the main one is note accuracy, and you already covered it, and it's the same concepts when it is for for 4 mallets. Uh, my question is going to be more in general, the one that I have, as far
Yeah.
as how to go about preparing an all state audition. If you could give us a summary towards the end of
Yeah.
as a student, how do you approach it? And
Yeah.
it's more general.
Yeah, let me talk about that at the end. Remind me about that because my big spiel will be it's the same thing that professionals do. It's just the time scale is smaller or
Yeah.
longer for the student. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about this solo, and then we'll cover that at the end. So,
Yes.
again, go to the TMEA errata, the edits. Make sure that you have written in all the crescendos and different dynamics that aren't in the original piece. That's just a no-brainer, but it's something that a lot of people are going to forget or just miss on doing. Mallet-wise, you'll notice in the etude, it's got marked in kind of 4 hard mallets. I actually use 3 mediums and a medium soft in the bass. So I've got 3 M113s, and then in the bass, I have an M112 out of the Van Sice series. And it's a little different. I just like the bass mallet to be a little bit softer. It allows me also to voice some moments and have some fullness in that lower range that I wouldn't have if there are all these M113s that are just medium. When it comes to kind of note accuracy stuff, by the way, when it comes to 4 mallets, something that I credit helping me was doing drum corps. So I marched cadets for a few years, played marimba, and what we did all summer long was played exercises. And then you play some show at kind of like the middle point of the day, and then you go do your competition or whatever. And something that I love about drum corps is that it gives you a instructor who stands right in front of you. You're going to do tons of exercises, and they're going to be able to talk about the exact rotation, the turn, where your thumb is, the interval changes. You're going to be playing the same kind of. A lot of drum corps play these really fun, kind of like poppy exercises, but really those nitty gritty, just exercises of. Those are the ones, in my opinion, that get students further along faster because they're focused on notes, they're focused on technique, they're focused on stroke, they're not focused on having a blast and making it a pop tune. Instead, I always say, technique is probably the most boring thing that you do, but it can also be the most fun because it's going to help you grow the most. And whereas when you're kind of going and you're moving all around the instrument, and yeah, you're a little inaccurate, yeah, your fingers aren't doing what they want, that's when you get in trouble and you're really not getting maybe as good as you could be. So I really do love the drum corps activity, marching arts in general. I think that that's one of the greatest benefits that it offers is, it gets you time to really work your technique stroke so that you can then take a piece like this and apply that technique work, that foundation, and be musical on top of it much more easily than like, oh man, I'm missing that note because my fingers aren't moving the way I want to. Instead, no, I got the right notes. Now I'm going to be musical with it. All right. So that's just kind of a glamorous shout out to drum corps. Do it if you can. Marching percussion, love it. It's a great way to get better. All right. So in this solo, there are some things that we can talk about. The big thing for me is just watch some videos, especially high schoolers. You probably don't have a ton of time on 4 mallets. And I really try to think about that when I make my videos. So I'm trying to use stickings that I think, well, may not be like stickings that I would ultimately use if I was playing this as a professional. I think they're stickings that would help most high schoolers be accurate and be musical with the least amount of trouble. So we've got like this section that starts at measure 8, where we're going. And so I've seen some videos that have different stickings where people are like bringing their 2 mallet up, and that's fine. But for me, I really find that that's not a big issue. Same thing later on when we have this 29 through 30, 31. We've got these little arpeggiation. Getting that 1 mallet around is a little bit more challenging. You could technically kind of bring another mallet down to go like and cross over, but I feel like as a young student that would cause more issues. So again, I'm not bashing any of those stickings. I'm just trying to say when I work up my stickings, I really do try to think about a young high school percussionist who doesn't have a ton of formal experience and will not love those kind of cross arounds or, kind of pulling mallets up to different areas that kind of get them less muscle memory. That's, I don't know, maybe not as solid. So take it with a grain of salt. The stickings that you see, do the ones that work best for you. When it comes to any kind of four mallet solo, you can bet your bottom dollar there's almost always going to be a melody and accompaniment. You think about Yell After the Rain. We've got in Yell After the Rain, we don't want, we want, and so same thing in the beginning, we don't want, instead keep that accompaniment lower, and that will give your melody more room to be musical. And so hopefully you hear in that moment that accompaniment, the left, area, usually left hand, is a little bit softer. The right hand's a little bit louder, also allowing it to be phrased up and down. And the other thing you have to kind of watch out for is getting good quad stops or triple stops. So not going, instead make sure they're all hitting. And that can be a little challenging when you are trying to bring the melody out and trying to keep the accompaniment low, because generally you're going to have two different heights. So you got to use your ear and make sure that everything's hitting real flat, really at the same time, and we're not getting any flamminess between the mallets. Other things, so musicality, like I said, there's not a ton of moments here where you can really be overly musical. I think the melody is obviously a point, just like you saw me doing, where you can be musical. But another great moment, I think, is this measure 29 arpeggiation. It says pui moso with feeling. So pui means more, moso means motion. So more motion, usually meaning a little faster. But I think you can also take this to mean not rubato, but maybe just a little push and pull. So obviously the end has a retardando on the second time as listed in the TMEA errata, but you can hear kind of moving, not just playing it super straight. Like it would be with a metronome. Now, you'll notice in my recording, I do play it straight because I am playing with the play along track. And I also want it to be a great reference video. I don't want it to be a video that's like the end all be all interpretation. I want the 99% of students that use it to help them play things in time so they can, if they want to choose later on after learning it in time, they can choose to be musical and push and pull a little bit. Again, we don't want to over romanticize and go. That would be too much. That loses all sense of pulse and feel. And yes, it might be super musical, but it's missing kind of the integrity of the music, that idea of keeping a good bit of time. So take that again with a grain of salt. Musicality is one of those things that we want to be careful with. And just like salt, if you add a little to a meal, it can make it taste better. If you add a lot, it just tastes like salt, or it's overly romanticized. And then you miss the point of the meal. You miss the point of the notes of the solo. The last thing that I'll talk about is just this meno moso at measure 24. Meno means less. Moso, like we talked about, means motion. So less motion or a little slower. So we come out of this at measure 21 in time, and we go then slower. So make sure that you got that good time. Slower. Again, I took out the dynamics just to get the feel of it out there. But that's kind of what I want to talk through with those things. We got any questions, Gilbert, or do you want to talk through that last topic that you had about preparation?
Yes, that was my main one. I find I'm in a new district, and I've I see this everywhere we go, and sometimes students don't know how to go about preparing an etude, and sometimes we don't teach them, and we expect them to know, and the bottom line is, they don't. I went through something similar when I was in college. I'm sure all of us can relate. At some point we felt that way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the art of practicing has come a long ways. Uh, I wouldn't say it was this, but it was much more of this, where someone would give you a piece of music and they'd say, "Come back to me in a week" or "Come back to me in a month," and so you just kind of had to figure out the what we would do in the practice room, which for a lot of people is frustrating because we would just go in there, try to play through it, get it right, and bring it back. But really, when it comes to large scale practice plans, so we've got four pieces, and if you think about a senior recital in college, it's very similar. Usually they'll have 4 or 5 pieces, and they're very challenging pieces. So we approach these in a way that takes the amount of time that we have and makes the most use of it. So obviously, the initial learning phase is the one that we want to try to get through as quick as possible, but we don't want to rush through. So that's where I think most students make the biggest issues, like I talked about before. When they get those pieces of music, they don't use a metronome, they start way too fast, and then they just kind of learn this poor muscle memory, and then they fight that for the next like 3 months before they go into their region auditions. So instead, you don't have to take out a calendar and map this out. You can, though. It would be a great idea to do this. If you're a really strong studious student, you would do this, but you take the time that you have and then you start to build in checkpoints. So let's say that we have 3 months till our region audition. Well, that means we probably have, let's say, roughly 3 chunks of time. So the first month would be learning all the pieces. That gives us kind of 4 weeks. We got 4 pieces. Why not learn a piece a week? Or, as we know, generally the 2 mallet is going to be the hardest solo. Then you could say, the 4 mallet would be the next hardest, whatever you rank them as, and learn them from hardest to easiest. Now, this is something that I love that I heard Paul Rennick does, is he learns the hardest piece of the DCI show first for his drum corps. So that's usually the end where the big kind of finale is, the Ramma Jamma part. And then he learns back to the beginning. Why? Because the beginning is probably a little bit easier. It's a little bit quicker to get than the end is. So that gives the students more time to kind of like develop and get those harder sections under their hands rather than having the easy sections first, getting those, and then getting the hardest section and having the least amount of time. So whenever you're working pieces, always go after the hardest pieces first, save the easiest pieces for last. So for me, I always work the 2 mallet piece first. I then work the 4 mallet or the snare, or usually that, and then usually timpani is I would say the easiest, but it may be the hardest for you. And if that's the case, work the timpani the first so that you have the most time with that. So you take your month, maybe in that first month, you get everything up to like 75, 80% tempo. Great. And maybe in the second month, you kind of work everything up so it gets to tempo, and then you plan like a mock performance. So, okay, I'm gonna buy a pizza and have all my percussion friends watch me play through all 4 etudes. Or what my students at SFA do is they'll have kind of a listening party, and so everyone that wants to play. So if you've got 5 people doing these all-state etudes, all 5 of you, and then anyone else, you come, you listen, and then you give feedback to those people. And that would give you 1 month to do kind of what I call confidence building reps. So again, not just playing it at tempo over and over and over, but playing it at like 60, 80, 90, and then 100, and then without the metronome. And then, playing it 4 or 5 times without the metronome. Obviously, if you're having trouble in a section, take the time, isolate that section, go slow to fast until you get it right, and put it back in. But that would give you a nice kind of like rough layout for how you would plan all state or region audition, or even like a senior recital. Take the hardest piece, work it up, get the easiest piece. I actually only recommend working up 2 pieces at a time. And then when you learn those 2 pieces, if you learn one but you're still working on this one, start working on that third one. Once you get that second one learned, start working on that fourth one, so that you're not working on 4 pieces all at the same time. And that'll help you focus in the practice room a little bit better as well.
Yes, that last one about how the sequence to go about it. Now, would you recommend, like, okay, I'm working on these 2, I finished this one, uh, starting to learn this one. Maybe start with run throughs of these just to keep it under the hands, and then move on to the others.
Yeah, so for me, I would just instead of doing like run throughs, I would actually maybe that's the right word. Do a run through, but I wouldn't get them up to tempo. So like
Yeah.
learned up to like 75% tempo for the first two, then I would start learning this one at 50% or slower and keep these at 75 while still sometimes hitting them at 50, 60, 70, and then 75. And then once I get both of these worked up, then start working on that last one until they're all worked up at 75% tempo. And then maybe get these first two up to 100, and then third one, and then fourth one up.
That, that, that is gold right there, sir. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. That that's why you're the man, sir. That's why you are the man. Um, I have another question, and I know you have information on this because at one point we did a stream, and you're welcome to check it out. It's up in the Valley Percussion Festival page and in the G Drums YouTube channel, when it about being present. And my question is the mental game, because sometimes there's kids that can play, they can play, but when they go into the audition room, they they crumble, they make mistakes, and they snowball. And I've seen it, too many a times where kids should have been an all-stater, should have advanced, but didn't because the mental game was not there. What do you recommend?
Well, and I think that this comes down to first thing we have to recognize with any kind of performance anxiety, because that's kind of what we're really talking about, is we all have it at some level. Now, I had much less performance anxiety when I was younger, and now I have more. And it weighs up and down. Sometimes I have more, sometimes I have less. And so there's things that we can do that are non-musical. We can go to therapy or counseling. We can also talk to our therapists or counselors about medication that can help. So it's not just something that we can bear through and get through. Sometimes we do need those services or that medical help as well. But when it comes to me with the general advice about dealing with performance anxiety and preparation for big auditions, it's don't let the audition be like the moment where everything happens for the first time. So what I would say is, if you're an instructor, have a night where everyone comes and plays either streamed live and or played for parents, so that they're in a different place, they're in the auditorium, they're dressed up nice, the sound's different. Same thing, I always encourage my students to at some point record themselves live before their lesson so that they can get that kind of run through. So we've all heard it as teachers, oh well, I can play it a lot better, I just had some flubs today, or I got nervous. And yeah, totally understandable. But you can help reduce those nerves and manage those nerves by having experienced them earlier, seeing what helps and what doesn't. So again, it's that hard advice of, if you want to get better at performing, you got to perform more. If you want to get better at auditioning, put yourself in more audition situations. And you know what? You may find that you crumble, but you may find, okay, I stopped breathing, or maybe I need to take just 10 seconds before I actually play. Because a lot of students, when they come up to the instrument, they just go, and they want to get it done, and that's kind of that school mentality of, you get a quiz, you immediately start taking it. You don't go, okay, it's time for a quiz. Maybe some of you do, but I didn't. I would want to get all that information down because I felt like it was leaking out of my head. With music, it's muscle memory. Yeah, we're thinking through it, but we really just want to take that moment. And I saw like Lisa Pegger, she would put her hand on the instrument for 10, 15, 20 seconds. And I forget her rationale or explanation. It was something just kind of getting in tune with the instrument, just kind of being present, and then taking that moment and then getting into the playing. Because we tend to, all of us do it as performers, we want to rush in and get it done and take the test, versus actually taking the moment and just trying to calm ourselves down a little. And even if that moment you're kind of freaking out, okay, breathe. Maybe you breathe more than you would have if you hadn't. Or maybe your hands are shaking, you just put it down again, you let them hang, and then you lift them back up. And maybe they'll shake less. Maybe they're not done shaking, but they're done shaking less for you. So again, put yourselves in the situations that you're preparing for. So all state situations, prepare for it the same way. Audition in front of the parents, in front of your band directors, in front of your lesson teacher. And also make every lesson you have a performance. So every time a student plays for me in a lesson, the first thing they do is they're going to play that solo. We're not going to talk about it. I don't want them telling me, well, yeah, I'm tired, or my dog, ate my homework from this class. I always tell them the music speaks for itself. Just play. And I can tell if people are nervous. We can all tell. But the point isn't to give excuses about why things might not be good. It's just to put it out there and see what you got. So the same thing in your auditions. Just go out there, put it out there, play the best you can, prepare the best you can. If you miss a note, if you forget and have a mental flub, we all get upset at ourselves. That's understandable. But then you got to let it go and either just try to keep playing or just stop and restart. But just take care of yourself and realize that we're not brain surgeons. We're not curing cancer here. We're having some fun playing some music. Hopefully we're having fun playing
Yeah.
some music and getting better, because I'm still a student. I still practice 2 hours every day for the most part. And I still work on those little ideas, and I'm still working diddles, and I'm still working accent and tap. And we're just always going to be students till the day we die. And that's the great part about it, is that there's just no end to it, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Very, very good pointers. When my son was in high school, and I do this with all my students, from my studio and my private students. um, I have them, every day that you're gonna practice, you're gonna go up to the instrument cold. You're not gonna warm up. You will go through your ritual though, like what you were saying, touch the instrument, right? We all have different rituals that we go through pre playing the tune, right, for our audition. And I had him practice his ritual religiously every single time. And I always brought kids, around. I bring kids around them so that they can, be in front of people. And the thing is, and I do this from the beginning, even if we're just going to play two lines, because that's how far we've gotten. I ask them to step back, feel the mallets, take in a deep breath, let it out, and focus on the task at hand. Play it well. And they're at a disadvantage because they're cold, right? So, your job is to just make it happen. Put
Yeah.
everything in its place, notes, rhythms, dynamic, everything. And that's all you're thinking. And then they'll go through it. And that he tells me it helped him, my son, it helped him tremendously in every audition scenario, that he was. And I do it with all of my students, because they're practicing being there and focusing on, I gotta make it happen, instead of like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of people. It was, I'm there, I focus. I'm there, I focus. I'm there, I focus. I'm there, I focus. And um, I learned that repeating that, putting reps on that, long run, pays high dividends. If we try to help our kids close to the auditions, it's a bit too late. It's a bit too late. That just the way this gets better, our muscles get better. This gets better. I like the way you explained something like that in our last stream. So
Yeah.
yes.
And a great way to practice for a performance as well. I'm, I guess, announcing it here first, but we're going to do the two mallet challenge again. So
Oh,
on Instagram, it's going to be hashtag TMEA23 SFA. And so you'll start seeing me putting that on Instagram and Facebook. And so we'll have some time in November where students can upload their TMEA and ATSSB two mallet solos to Instagram with those hashtags. It'll be TMEA23 SFA and it'll be ATSSB 23 SFA. And so the top three from each of those will get some prizes from Zildjian, Black Swamp, Evans, Tycoon, Vic Firth, Yamaha, and Ensemble Block. So it'll be really neat and a great way for students to practice their performing.
that pretty much wraps it up. Any final words besides inviting them to participate in that event, sir?
Absolutely. Just my name is Dr. Brad Meyer. I'm the percussion director at Stephen F. Austin State University. And if you're a student in high school looking to come to college for music and percussion, reach out to me through email, Facebook, or Instagram. let's have you out for a day so that you can experience what it's like being a music major here at this fantastic program. And I hope to see you all at TMEA in February.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I did put already the link to your videos and the track downloads from your website. So if you just take a look at the comments, guys, I did it in YouTube and in the Facebook page, and just click on it, and it's gonna take you to his website, and then take a look at the other stuff. Uh, Thank you so much, Dr. Meyer. Always a pleasure to have you. We learn so much. Every single time I see you, whether it's in person or here, or when we message and talk a bit, I just feel like I learned, and I
Well,
learned substantially.
thank
Yes,
you for putting this together, Gilbert. I know it's not easy, and you don't get paid for this, so you're doing a great service for the entire community. And I'm looking forward to hopefully getting down to the valley sometime soon and seeing you and all the other great programs down there.
yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Check out our other streams that we have. We have Timpani, we have Tim Jennis, we have many different world-class educators covering the different aspects of percussion, whether it's orchestral, rudimental, drum set. Check it out. It's all there. Just go and pick, and see you on the next one.